Are you concerned about your research funding, your productivity, your team management? The key to all of these is making better decisions as a research leader. So keep watching to learn strategies to make those better decisions as you build your research lab and career. I'm Dr. Morgan Giddings at SciFoundry. Our goal at SciFoundry is to help researchers everywhere have more productivity, funding, and fun. So the decisions that you make as a researcher, as you build a research lab, determine your overall productivity over time, your funding over time, not only the initial funding that you get in the door when you get that first grant funded, but also how easy that grant is and other grants to get them renewed later on, which is really important to keep things going. It also determines the people you're around every day, both good and bad. That's collaborators, team members, and other people around you that will influence dramatically your experience and your progress in research. It will determine whether your research is productive and successful or not. Whether you're using the right approaches to solve the right problems will really determine the progress on the research itself. And your level of burnout versus your level of enjoyment and fulfillment. Important. Ultimately, these all boil down to your frustration and anxiety levels versus your calmness and your confidence. So basically, everything about your experience building a research program is determined by your decisions. So it's really important. And even more so, decisions have momentum. So the longer you let a bad decision linger, the more sticky in your life, in your career, it becomes. So just as an example, many people start off, as I did, approaching grant writing in a trial and error kind of way. And we get rejections. We get one after another after another. Again, I've been there. And it reduces our confidence, increases our stress, our anxiety, and that actually makes us into less confident, worse grant writers who are less likely to write a clear and compelling proposal. So the problem feeds on itself and we get more and more negative momentum in many cases on these things until or if we actually have a real pivot. And often those are very challenging moments. I faced one of those in my grant writing career. So let's discuss strategies to make better decisions early on so we don't get that negative momentum. So the first of those is to avoid the dumb tax. So this concept comes from the book The Road Less Stupid by Keith J. Cunningham. Now this book is about overcoming the difficulties of starting and running a business. So you may say, what's this got to do with research? Well, several of the core principles in the book apply to the difficulties of starting and running a research lab. And one of those things that applies to this is the dumb tax that he shares. So the dumb tax refers to the often very big cost of making bad decisions. I made a list recently of all of the bad decisions that I made in my research career leading up to my tenured faculty job at UNC Chapel Hill. And it was a long list that if I had avoided even some of those, a few of those, I would have made more progress, been more happy, and been more likely to really get to a point where I could look back on my career and said, that was really good. Like I did a good job there, as opposed to feeling unconfident and a lot of stress and anxiety, even after I had a lot of funding. So the cost of bad decisions in time, energy, and/or funding is the dumb tax. Even very smart people often make bad decisions due to our cognitive bias, our emotion, bad peer mentor examples, and just lack of deeper thinking. Like we don't feel like we have the time for that. So the key is to spend more time thinking and clarifying and less time just doing stuff. Most of us work way too hard and don't spend enough time with our thinking caps on because we're working so hard. Kind of ironic, isn't it? So the next one is to practice clarity time. This is dedicated time for thinking and clarifying. The time spent doing this thinking and clarifying can help you make better decisions, leading to less holdups, less blocks in your progress, and therefore more progress. and more productivity. It's really important to make this a regular habit or ritual and turn off all of the distractions and focus on just clarifying thinking on important decisions. Dig in and do this regularly. It is one of the most important practices that you can put into place, and it will gain far more than the time it takes to do this. Another strategy is to ditch the magical thinking. So even the most rational people are susceptible to magical thinking, and I'm talking about researchers and scientists included amongst those. So magical thinking really says that research success is about things like lucky breaks, or just happening to know the right people, or having the right information, and that will just lead to everything working out. And or having the next brilliant idea. I've got this brilliant idea. That means my career is saved, my research is saved because it's a brilliant idea. No, those things are not what make a career and a research lab work over time. Even though these ideas of sort of the quick and random thing happening, the lucky break happening, those are promoted in much of our culture, both in movies, TVs, books, and even just in our research culture in general. They're promoted, but the real truth is that fortune favors the better decision makers, because you will get lucky breaks, and that's good, but it's what you do with those lucky breaks that will determine whether you move forward in a big way or not. And also, you will get the opposite of lucky breaks. You will get unlucky breaks. And again, what happens, how you move forward, is based upon your decision making as you encounter this unlucky break and what you do with that. What kind of decisions, the quality of the decision that you make. And these add up over time far more than the one lucky break or the one unlucky thing that happened. So we really have to ditch the magical thinking if we want to make better decisions. Another is, don't make decisions based on conventional wisdom, based on the wisdom of the crowd. So conventional wisdom is frequently wrong, though it feels safe. It feels safe to us as human beings because we were evolved to feel safer in a crowd, feel safer to do what other people are doing and go where other people have gone. And even sometimes we succumb to a sort of subtle peer pressure to go along with, hey, I did it that way, so why aren't you doing it that way, right? This is in our evolutionary wiring, and it feels safe, but it's often wrong. And even if it's not outright wrong or untrue, it often doesn't consider our individuality and our own circumstances, because it's just sort of comes from an average behavior, an average thing that people do. And the interesting thing about following this sort of average, this collective average of conventional wisdom, most people are not actually doing nearly as well as they could be, and nearly as well as they are presenting themselves to be doing. Many people who present themselves as everything's going great and I've got my funding and I've got a great team and all of that, many of those are actually struggling more often than you would guess behind the scenes. And I know because I work with a lot of people, and it's okay that people are struggling behind the scenes, but the key here is to not look at the surface level and say, hey, all those people are doing better than I am, and they're all doing great, and I'm not, so I better follow this crowd wisdom. No, often they are struggling behind the scenes much more than you know. So following that sort of crowd wisdom doesn't work so well. Make better decisions by going deeper and not just following the crowd. Another one is to avoid one-size-fits-all solutions and mentors, which is sadly, most of them, not all, but most. So what worked for your mentor, your colleague, or your department chair may not only not work for you and your own circumstances, it may actively hold you back. It may be like this poorly fitting shirt shown in this picture that really is not right. One of the problems is that few mentors, few colleagues who give advice, few department chairs who give advice are truly circumspect enough to help you find what works for you authentically, that really fits who you are and what you need to be happy and satisfied and inspired and move forward on your research in a productive way. The odd thing is that despite being scientists, most scientific and research colleagues love to give advice based on often one-time situations, basically anecdote. It worked for me, so it should work for you, right? And that's really unfortunate because often what works for us can only be determined by really digging in deeper and figuring out what does authenticity look like for us and how does that match with a strategy of moving forward through challenges in a productive way. And we have to do that by digging deeper. Another one is to avoid reactive decisions. These are decisions prompted by something that happened to you recently, whatever that may be. Could be a grant rejection, it could be even a grant getting funded, or a collaborator who got a grant funded, or somebody who is mad at you, or a team member who's having some problems. Whatever it is, when we get into reactivity by something that's often unwanted, then this causes us to have issues. Because the issue is that these reactive circumstances typically cause us to have an emotional, not logical reaction. Now, we may convince ourselves, we're pretty good as humans at convincing ourselves that I'm being logical in responding to this situation, whatever it is. But often those logical, seemingly logical responses that we're having are actually just a cover story for some deeper emotion we're having about that rejection or whatever that thing is that happened. And so often the logic is very surface level. It does not go very deep, and therefore the decisions are not very good that are based in reactivity. We often end up bouncing around from one reactive decision to the next, and many people get caught up in a sort of reactive loop where it's just from one reactive thing to the next, to the next, to the next, instead of really getting into a much more proactive mode of decision making. So as a result, these are often very low quality decisions that do lead to often more problems, more wasted time, money, energy, and more sort of demoralized operation. So let's make higher quality decisions by not doing decision making reactively. Another one is to get clear on your values and your vision to inform proactive, rather than the reactive, decision making. Better proactive, non-reactive decisions are based in previously defined parameters. Well, let me say what I mean by previously defined parameters. That means you sat down one or more times and actually thought about these things, wrote them down, and got clear for yourself on things like your personal and your team values. What's important and authentic for you and your team? What do you enjoy doing? What's your genius zone? Versus what things are you not so good at, or do you not want to get distracted by? Really getting clear on those values. Getting clear on the vision of where you want to go next in your career and in your research. It is so important to have a sort of focal point for where you're going instead of just being there drifting and reacting. When you have that focal point, that vision or that goal, it's much easier to stay on track. And when a decision is facing you about what to do, you can say, is this decision in alignment with this vision that I have? Is it in alignment with my personal and team values, or is it not? And it can help you tremendously in those decisions, as well as defining in advance guardrails that clarify what is in your go zone and what is likely to be a distraction for you. It's so easy especially when you start being more successful, when you start getting funding in and getting a reputation. A lot of people may approach you saying, I've got an idea for a collaboration. I've got an idea for doing a grant proposal to get some more funding in the door for so-and-so project. And it's really easy to just say yes to all of that kind of stuff. But it can be really a dangerous road to go down to say yes to too much that's not really in your zone of genius and your zone of focus. So this really takes an investment upfront to define the values, the vision, and the guardrails that will inform your decision making, and then to actually use those in your process of deeper thinking that informs your decision making. But it can be tremendously saving of bad decisions, avoiding bad decisions, preventing bad decisions, and helping you move forward with more productivity, more progress, and more confidence that what you're doing is the right thing to be doing in this moment. So another one is to align the decisions that you make to your authenticity, to really who you are. So decisions made that are based on what worked for others can lead you to a place where you're miserable, stressed, lacking confidence. Just to give an example, if you're an introvert like me who makes decisions based on a strategy developed by an extrovert, like go to conferences and network with everybody, talk to everybody, make sure they know you by talking to all of them at the poster sessions and at the brunches and whatever, not brunches, but like whatever, the breaks, right? The thing is, you'll likely be miserable and lose confidence, because if I, as an introvert, went around trying to talk to everybody, I would just feel stressed out and I would feel exhausted. And then I'd be like, oh, I'm horrible at this. And maybe I'm just not cut out for this. The problem wasn't that I wasn't cut out for it. I got plenty of funding and I got plenty well known. I got tenure by unanimous vote at UNC Chapel Hill. So those weren't problems, but I sort of decided I'm not going to do that after being exhausted by trying to do that. It's so important to align the decisions that you make to who you are authentically and to find ways of making decisions that honor that and respect that and work in concert with that rather than working against it. So you need a strategy that's authentic to who you are and to make decisions in alignment with that strategy. Very important if you want to be more productive and more successful. Authentic strategies are more sustainable and more confidence building. Another one is to find a mentor who helps you identify blind spots in decision making and to go deeper into your authenticity and your clarity. So the typical mentor likes to talk to hear themselves solve your problem with a quick solution. Like we all want, like when somebody is struggling or wants some help from us, our egos say, oh yeah, I've got an idea, I've got a solution, I've got something awesome for you, here you go. Like, because we want to feel important. We want to feel like we're making a contribution as a mentor. But this is a problem, actually. It's this idea of being a sage on stage. I know it all. I've experienced it all. And I've been there, both as a recipient and as a giver of this kind of advice. But the difference between that and the truly great mentors is that great mentors spend far more time asking questions, digging in. They want to find out who you are, what really motivates you, what you really want out of your career, your research enterprise and endeavor, what your vision is, and so on. And they really dig into that stuff, and they dig into the nature of the challenges and figure out, like, is there some repeated issue going on here, not just like this thing being a one-time problem? And what's beneath that? What are the patterns that you might be exhibiting in your decision-making based on cognitive bias that are actually causing repeated problems for you? And they really dig in with you instead of just giving you the quick fix, because often the quick fix is anything but. It's often taking you in a wrong direction. Just quick technical fixes, like, for example, in grant writing. I have done a lot of trainings on grant writing over the years. I've worked with hundreds of people from the nation's and the world's best institutions on improving grant writing. And for many people, the grant writing issue is not an issue of the technical inability to write well. Many people show up quite good technically at the writing. So then what's the issue? Well, the issue is often a deeper lack of clarity about their research, about how this research is going to satisfy this community, and how they can build a bridge between those two things. And there's often a lot of deeper work that has to happen to really help people do a better job of bringing in funding for their research. That doesn't happen by just giving quick fix solutions. And as a bonus for you, it's really important to consider that you find a mentor outside of your department and sort of close circles of colleagues and peers, so that you can explore this more openly and vulnerably. And that is because often, in order to do this digging, you have to open up a bit. You have to be willing to share what's really going on for you and the struggles that you're having and the sort of repeated challenges that you keep running into. And it's really hard to share these with people who might be evaluating you for tenure or considering talking to people who are evaluating you for tenure or working with you as a collaborator and might say, wait a second, you're having those issues. Maybe I don't want to collaborate with you, right? So it's really hard to share that kind of stuff with people who are too close to you. It can be very, very important to actually go outside, to go somewhere else to find that kind of deeper input and mentoring. So make better decisions so you can be more successful, happy, and productive in your research. And if you want to get more help with making better decisions via a free strategy consultation and other resources, just go over to scifoundry.com and I will see you there. This is Dr. Morgan Giddings signing off.